our fingertips as consumers about what is correct for me. Actually, Runner's World came out with a really funny a chart of in the middle of their magazine. You would basically answer different questions, and then it would lead you to your shoe. And so we, at Big Peach, kind of took a look at it, and we came to the conclusion that it meant nothing. So just because you're 20 pounds heavier than someone else doesn't mean that a shoe is going to work more or less better for you. So let's see, you had the Zoots on. So that shoe is kind of leading into, that is specific to triathlon. So more so the reason is that there's going to be a drainage on the bottom. So I'm not sure if that's specific. It may or may not. Some of them have drainage. So if you're looking for a triathlon shoe, something with drainage, it may be a good idea if you struggle with blisters and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of go through. So we've got regular training shoes. We've got something. Actually, I'm going to take off my shoe. So I wore these today. We've got somewhat of a little bit of a lighter weight shoe, more so racing flat, minimal. So I'm going to kind of go through them in this order because from the most built up shoe to the least built up shoe. So regular training shoe, you have different stability levels. Does anyone here kind of know what the stability, or who knows their stability? Overpronation, anyone? Underpronation, neutral? Okay, so I'll kind of go into that a little bit. So as you run, you go through what's called a gait cycle. Gait cycle, heel, midfoot, toe off. During that, you have to do what we call pronation. Pronation is just basically the way your foot stabilizes itself on the ground. So a person who overpronates is going to hit, they're going to excessively roll inward, and then they're going to toe off. The problem with that is that when you hit, you start to roll, what's my knee doing? It's kind of torquing, so it's turning. The body doesn't like torque. So the ideal position is going to be you hit, you stay nice and neutral, and then you go into toe off. So shoes have kind of been built around that idea. So with something like this, which I didn't bring, let's see. Can I see your shoe? Real quick. Unfortunately, this is the one shoe that they've made now that doesn't have the nice gray plate. So with this shoe, you can actually see how it has this gray material here. That is what they call medial posting or stability. And so what's going to happen is as you start to roll through, it's going to stop you from rolling through, and it's going to keep you in that more neutral position. Now, a shoe with something like this, I'm going to just keep that here for a second. I promise I won't steal it. A shoe like this doesn't have that, so it's not going to be doing anything for you. So if you're a person who's overpronating, it's going to allow your foot to roll in. There are no absolutes with running shoes. So like for me, I do overpronate a little bit, but when I get put into a stability shoe, it's doing something weird with my biomechanics, and it causes me to have some pretty bad knee pain. So I've learned, and it took a long time for me to figure that out. It took like 8 months of running with like massive patellar tendonitis to be like, okay, I need to figure this out. And then once I kind of did my own experimenting, I realized that that was the case. And so now I run with a neutral shoe, and everything is fine. So these shoes are built up on what we call a drop. So from heel to forefoot, usually it's anywhere from about 10 to 12. More shoes now are going down to about 10 to 8, but originally it was about 12 from heel to forefoot. So now, a lot of us race in what we call racing flats, or the Zoots, the triathlon shoes. Those have about a 4mm drop. So do you train in those shoes?
No, I train in Mizuno weightlifter.
Okay, so that is, I'm pretty sure that's 12 as well. So what do you race in? The same shoe?
I kind of go on and off. I've done my last recent one is Newton's.
Okay,
the gravity.
Okay, cool. So what's happening there is, in some instances, what people will do is, and they don't even realize they're doing it, is that they're doing their regular training in a 12mm drop. But then when they go and they do their speed work, or even sometimes they're not even doing their speed work in those shoes, that would be better. But they end up racing in a shoe that's a 4mm drop. And then they wonder why they get halfway through the race and their calves are cramping on them. What happens is when you drop, so if you're going from being in 12mm and then you drop to 4mm, you're stretching out that Achilles, which then puts a lot more stress on the calf muscles, which can cause them to cramp. So I would suggest.
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
Can you address her shoes?
The Newtons, yeah. Can I have your shoe for a second?
Sure. We're talking about changes in drop.
Yeah. So this is actually introductory. So Newton does have they have a kind of a line of, I'm not super familiar with all of their shoes. I know the idea behind them, but they have a different line. They kind of have like the introductory, and this is actually one of the introductory because it has a blown rubber outsole. So if you get to the performance one, which is like the original, like really lime, like yellow-green one, it has basically, it's just like a foam, because the idea is that you're not landing on that heel anymore. So with Newton, their whole idea is energy return. And so what they've done is they've put these lugs here. And so if you're landing on your midfoot, which is kind of the ideal, so biomechanically, the idea is that you want to land here with a nice bent knee. So what Newton has done is they're like, okay, well, we can work with this. So you come here, you go in like a circular motion, and then you land on that midfoot. Those lugs kind of capture that energy, and then they allow you to have more of a push off. The only problem is that if you're not a proficient midfoot striker, you're going to end up hitting on your heel, and then you're going to have to actually pop yourself up over those legs, and it's going to be working against you. So,
and in terms of drop, you're going from here to here.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can be really,
really bad. So yeah, so then you've got it where you're basically going from this situation to this situation, which drops it even further. Now, for a person who lands on their midfoot, and this is a shoe that could, you know, like I think you've been running these in a while, right? And you haven't had any problems or anything.
I haven't had any problems, but
Yeah.
I haven't run in a while.
Oh, okay, you have been running. I thought I saw you in them at one of the races, but maybe not. So actually, we had a lady come in and she insisted on wearing this shoe. We were like, man, like you really, you know, she had like a marathon coming up or something. We tried to kind of talk her out of it, and she ended up going out that weekend and running like 20 miles and couldn't run for like 3 weeks because she had just torn up her calves. So it's one of those things you really have to be careful with when you're choosing your shoes.
Circumstantially, I've seen a lot of injuries with those shoes.
Yeah. Now, but again, if you've got a good, if your biomechanics are good midfoot and stuff like that, a shoe like that could really work to your advantage. But it's just, that's a shoe that you definitely want to work into. It's not for everybody. Okay, cool. So, where was I? So stability, so that drop. So we were going over the drop. So now a lot of shoes, what they're doing is they're having the same training. So a shoe like this is a what we call a high mileage trainer. So this is something that you can put anywhere from 350 to 450, 500 miles on them. Once you get into shoes like the Nike Freeze, or no one else has them on, but some of the training shoes like the Kinvara, or Tracy doesn't have her shoes, but like the Adidas Tempo, these are all shoes that are what we consider kind of performance or lightweight trainers. You can't get quite as much mileage out of something like that. But now what shoe companies have kind of started doing is they've started coming out with, like New Balance came out with, this is called the 890. This was a really popular shoe because it had the same construction as a regular training shoe, so you could get the same amount of mileage out of it, but it was a lot lighter, and that heel went from, now originally it stayed at 12, and that was kind of the big deal. It was like, oh, they stayed at 12, but they made it lighter and they made it more flexible. They've actually dropped it down to 8 now. But with something like, so a lot of shoes, so Saucony, so if anyone wears Sauconys, you're wearing Sauconys, so the next time you go in and get your shoe, you may be aware that they've dropped it from 12 to 8 now, so you may find that your calves might get a little bit sore. With a shoe like this, it's a little bit more flexible than a little bit more of a built-up shoe like this. You don't have quite as much flexibility out of a shoe like this. So now moving on to something like the Nike Free. So has anyone, Nike Frees are pretty popular, I'm sure everyone sees them anywhere or everywhere. With the Nike Free, the only thing that I will say that can be a little bit more hazardous with a shoe like this is that, can I see your shoe real quick? I'm like borrowing everyone's shoes. All right, so this shoe, it is, it's fairly flexible, but it's not quite as flexible as something like the Nike Free. So you don't have, they call these seams. You see how deep these flex screws are? So flex screws, they allow for movement in the shoe, but the problem is that if you have too many or they're too deep, it's going to make your foot work harder. So the less built up a shoe is, it's basically requiring your foot to do all the work that the shoe was originally doing for it. So when you got a shoe that's doing this and that just means that, you know, if you're at the end of a triathlon, or you know, you're going into your 6 mile run, this is going to make your foot work a little bit harder. Now something like this, and it all comes back to training. If you've trained your body though to work with something like that, you'll be completely fine. But I would not suggest doing every single one of your runs in, you know, something like that, and then race morning you put on something like this or something like this. that could potentially end in disaster or stress fracture. So again, lots of movement means that your foot's going to have to work a lot harder. Now some of these shoes, that one I don't think specifically, but some of the lightweight trainers as well as the Zoot, I'm pretty sure K-Swiss does it, they will actually have shoes that have what they call a fatigue posting. And what that is really just, as you run, muscles start to fatigue. And so what the whole idea is that it's not something big and bulky like that necessarily, but it's just enough to give your foot a little bit upper hand if it starts to kind of collapse in a little bit. So if you know that you are a person who overpronates, I would probably suggest going with something like that in your races, something with just a little, and you can ask your running store in the area, just have a posting or any stability. I would say stability. Different people don't say support because different companies use the words differently, or even just say medial posting. That'll be even better. Okay. Has anyone read any minimalist books or anything like that? Which one did you read?
Born to Run.
Born to Run. So originally when the whole minimal movement came out, it was kind of like this big this is it, this is what's going to make running not hurt anymore. And the whole idea was that you're basically going back to how we used to run. And the way we used to run was on that midfoot, because naturally if we were to all go outside and start running with bare feet, we would end up having a tendency to land a little bit more here rather than here, because naturally our body does want to land on that ball of our foot. And so when they came out with these, the whole idea was to get back to that barefoot running. The problem is that nowadays, how many of us go out and are able to run on grass or nice, beautiful pine straw trails or anything like that? If someone raises their hand, I'm going to call you. I figured, I was like, one of you two is probably going to, because you guys both smirked. But I mean, okay, so 2 out of the 20 of us in here can do that. Yes, yeah. It's like, yes, me. Well, I wish I lived your life, but a lot of us do end up on concrete. And so the forces that are applied on the body with concrete and asphalt are just so much higher than what you would find on, nice grassy trails or fields or trails. So if you're thinking about going into something like this, do it very cautiously, because now you're looking at going from 12 millimeters down to like a 0 drop. Or even some of them anywhere from 0 to 4, and then again, it's just you can just flex the shoe into just a million different shapes. So again, your foot is working so much harder in this, and the muscles in the foot are very sensitive, and it can cause. I don't know if anyone knows Perry Julian, but he's a podiatrist in the area, and he says that these shoes are keeping him in business, because he can't tell me how many people come in on a weekly basis with stress fractures, Achilles tendonitis, neuromas, just all kinds of things, because they've gone out and they've just been like, okay, I'm going to go run 3 miles of these. So if you're going to start working into something like this, or even something like this, you want to start slowly. So what I always tell people is start with 10%. So if you run, let's say you're running 10 miles a week, you start with 1 mile, and that's really hard for people, because 1 mile, that's nothing. But it's going to, in the long run, it's going to be a lot better to start with 1 mile rather than 3 miles. Because, beginning you start running, you're like, man, I feel great, this is awesome. And the next morning you wake up and your calf muscles are just screaming at you. So just be cautious with the shoes that you're picking to run in.
Are there benefits to running barefoot?
There are. So a lot of actually coaches and stuff will have their cross country kids do some barefoot running. They'll be like, all right, go give me a few, those strides that I say, the form strides. So they're like, all right, go give me a few form strides on the grass. There are some, because it strengthens those muscles. But again, it's one of those things where most people, they buy this new shoe and they're all excited about it, and they go out and they run 3 miles. So there's a huge difference between doing 4 form strides and then 3 miles of running. So I definitely think that it is something, and even walking around barefoot. Like if you're at your house, just take off your shoes and walk around barefoot so you can really strengthen those muscles. So.
Because I used to do that when I ran cross country as like a cool down. So
yeah.
Is that
okay? Yeah, and it would actually be better as a cool down than probably doing it as a warm up, just because you've done your warm up, you've done your workout, and then you go into the cool down. So your muscles are all warm and flexible and able to do something like that. You do it before a workout, and you could potentially end up tweaking something in your foot, or more than likely in the lower leg. Yeah. So cool. Any questions? Have your shoe back. It's like the one that I gave back. No? Cool. Well, say if you guys have never been fitted, I would definitely suggest going and talking to someone, just kind of, you know, asking questions and stuff. Because in the long run, it's going to help keep, you know, what does everyone always say? Running so bad for you. Well, it's not really bad.
Actually, I just had one comment.
Okay.
Your foot can change over time too. I ran fine for 3 years with neutral shoes.
Yeah.
No issues, felt great. And then over time, it started getting worse. And
Yeah.
just, you know, once I got into cycling, the legs got bigger. They're kind of
Biomechanics
further apart.
change, yeah.
So the feet have to come in further to still land in the center line of your body. Basically, I was overpronating.
Yeah.
And switched shoes, and I mean, that
Exactly.
cleared it up. Like,
Yeah,
instantly.
when you change your biomechanics or your running form, definitely. I did used to land on my heel, and then when I changed to more of the midfoot, now when I hit, I've been trying to figure it out too, what is tight in my leg that's causing this, but I just end up, you know, coming down on this side and then rolling in. Still landing on my midfoot, but I've just worn away the entire outside edge of my